Okay, so firstly, I would like to invite the questions from the audience first. If you have questions for the three presenters today, don't be shy. Okay, sorry. Could you, just kindly introduce yourself and. Okay.
I'm Father Paul, a priest from Cameroon, studying in Hong Kong U. I had the opportunity to attend this seminar, which I think has been very, very enriching. And I've learned a lot from all the presentations. I may be wrong, but I just want to find out from about the equipment which is to be used for the measuring of the air quality. If this equipment is carried, for instance, in the trams, I know most of the trams, the bus system, most of them are air conditioned, and controlling the air outside is okay because they are moving from another area to another area, but the air condition in the bus, I think, is stable because the air is continually being controlled. I don't know if I may be wrong there, but does it really give accurate readings running inside a bus which has a permanent air conditioned like in the buildings?
That's a good question, and it's a good question, and I can tell you from studies we've done also, we've asked that question. We actually put instruments like this inside a bus and have the same instruments on the outside of the bus. And what we can find, we do see differences. We find that the air quality inside the bus reflects the outside air. Sometimes a little higher, sometimes it's a little lower. It's higher sometimes because the people inside the bus may be a source of CO2, for example. It's lower because on average the buses in Hong Kong have particle filters. And so those particle filters work if you get a new bus. If you get an old bus, they don't have filters. So there is some protection from the bus. You can see that if you measure inside and outside. When we do our next KMB studies, we will have the instruments inside, but we'll have a little tube going to collect outside air. So we're protecting the instruments, but we're measuring outside air. Some buses in many parts of the world, like Jakarta and other places, maybe in Cameroon you say you're from, the buses are very leaky, and they may be worse inside also because you're pulling up exhaust directly from the floor underneath the bus. So it's a very important question. You have to think about how a bus operates.
Lukas Schwanek from City of Krakow. We have also a huge problem with air pollution because we are in a valley. So I have a detailed question concerning this interesting tests with the tram. Because we thought about using also the buses, but the first research, very general one, in the universities, they told us that it might be a problem that the PM particulate matters, because that's the problem in Krakow, should be tested without motion, yes? So two questions, if it's right, because tram moves, so it proves that it might be in the motion, and if these tools to measure the PM is very expensive, what is the price?
Yes, maybe I start first. I don't think movement would be a big, a fact in terms of the measurement. I'm sure Dane will add to that. Secondly, the equipment, I think, is getting less and less expensive as the technology is getting more and more mature. There are new prototypes coming out, and I think the key is really to we're talking about a very sophisticated system. We're talking about some of the sensors that's inside the equipment, and usually that's the part that's most expensive. But I think over the last 5 to 10 years, the price is going down, the quality is going up. Of course, it doesn't mean that then it's 100% accurate, in the sense that it has to be calibrated. There are different ways to make sure that the data is within an acceptable range of accuracy. And Dane, please.
Especially if you're interested in PM 2.5 or black carbon or ultrafine particles, those particles are small enough that the speed of the vehicle doesn't affect how the particles are collected or measured. If you were concerned about PM 10, that's another story. The speed of the vehicle is enough that the coarse particles cannot be effectively measured. Again, as Simon said, you're also not doing regulatory monitoring. If you're plus or minus 20%, that's good enough, because you're going to be collecting data every second or every 10 seconds. An air quality monitoring station, if you have one nearby, reports every hour. So it's good to take the equipment out to where, that's what I do, take the equipment out to where the problem may be to make the measurements. And the gases moving is no problem at all. So CO2, CO, NOx, that's where the problem is, that's where you can take the instruments. But again, I understand the academic scientist who's most concerned about precise measurements of PM is going to say you can't do an operation under motion. But you can, and you should.
Do you know in general the price of the equipment?
Well, the equipment's a question, but let's say you can make good measurements for $1,000 US for PM. I didn't make the point well enough. If you're interested in emissions and air quality related to traffic emissions, PM 2.5 may not be a very useful measurement because vehicles don't emit very much mass. So think about what you're going to measure. Black carbon is a much better measure of emissions from diesel exhaust if you're concerned about diesel traffic. NO2 you can measure with electrochemical cells. In fact, there's a NO2, this one is used to measure NO2 as well as particle and particle size. So NO2 you can do quite effectively with a very inexpensive small system. Maybe 500.
Dane, just to add to that question, this particular sensor that you have here, this is the one that would be around that range, or in
Yes.
terms of the price? Okay, okay, good. Additional questions from the audience before we? Yeah.
I've got a question. So in
Sure.
Hamburg, I've done measurements done measurement work in Barcelona and in Milan. It's the southern European cities where they have really serious NO2 problems. In Hamburg, are the measurements going on the roadways or near roadways to understand the contribution of different sources?
Well, yeah, they are. But as I have shown on the one chart, most of it is locally generated by the diesel cars. Yeah. So we have 3 different kinds of control stations in the city. One, most of them measure the background load, but 4 of them measure the regional, the local load. And as these causal research shows you, it's obvious that most of it is being emitted by cars, by diesel cars.
I'll add 2 more observations about emissions and NO2. One of the things that's happened in the developed world is the implementation of catalytic controls on diesel exhaust. Unfortunately, what many of those have done is they've taken what was a general mixture of NO and NO2 and converting some of it directly in NO2 on the roadway. And so that sometimes when especially in Southern Europe, we're seeing a bad outcome from what was a good idea of putting catalysts on diesels to reduce NOx emissions, because what it was doing now, in some cases, is directly emitting the regulated pollutant, which is NO2, onto the roadway. The other thing is that we've had some good luck in Hong Kong. It was just luck, I think. We've had some good luck in Hong Kong because in Hong Kong we don't use diesel in our light-duty vehicles at all. If you go to Singapore, you smell diesel exhaust everywhere because the taxis and the light-duty vehicles are all running on diesel. And their buses are not as advanced as here. So we've had some good luck with the type of fuel we chose to run our vehicles on. China, in Beijing, they never use diesel in light-duty vehicles. In Europe, they do use diesel in light-duty vehicles. So some places got lucky or made good choices. But the choice in urban planning about what sorts of vehicles you encourage makes a difference.
this point that you're making in terms of the choice, in terms of the diesel, for example, this is a very important issue as well for several of the rapidly developing Asian countries. For example, in the Philippines, we do have a bigger portion now of these diesel vehicles. And let me also probably ask you, there was a good discussion earlier from the presentations on the policies, potential policies. What do you think, for example, here in Hong Kong and also in Hamburg, you mentioned you're thinking about these the environmental zones and implementing this. For example, in Hong Kong and also in Hamburg, what do you see are the prospects for these zones being implemented, and what are the main challenges, if you can also share those?
Okay, now I think a couple of years ago, the government in Hong Kong, they proposed to put out what we call the low emission zones in 3 of the most congested roadside or areas in Hong Kong, including Causeway Bay, Central, and Mong Kok. But then what they are suggesting to do is to ask the bus companies to deploy, I think it's Euro 4 or better buses along those corridors. We argued as a think tank and with our fellow NGO friends that this is not just good enough, because we know even for Euro 4, Euro 5 buses, if they are running along those streets regularly, they are already emitting a lot of emissions. And because of how close people are with the roadside, basically the exposure risk is already very high. So can we do more? Can we actually ban the vehicles, or only allowing emission-free vehicles going into those areas? So this is one of the battlegrounds that we're trying to fight. But then secondly, I think as in my presentation, I show that it's not just Central, Causeway Bay, and Mong Kok. They are basically along the tramway, which is along all the major urban street canyons. We have similar problems. I think the reason why the government is proposing to do it in Causeway Bay and Central, because they have the air monitoring station there. So they have the data, they can show, these are the worst area. So they need to do something. But actually, as a matter of fact, everywhere is worse. So I think, instead of just focusing on 1 or 2 locations, if we really want to improve air quality along the most traveled or used corridor for people and for vehicles, we need to expand the concept of low emission zones. So this is just one measure out of many others. But I think the focus should be broadened so that the zone could be expanded. But of course, whether we just allow Euro 4 or better, or can we have an even tighter control, that's another question.
I'll make one more comment related to that and pass it along. So one point that you might have missed is that the roadside monitoring stations are located at the same places that the low emission zones are. So you're putting your best vehicles at the stations that measure roadside emissions. And so instead they come to my place in Shamshapo where there's no roadside monitoring. They use the old buses. Those buses never go away. They just move them. Yeah.
Well, in fact, in Germany, most of the economic traffic is being done by diesel cars and vehicles, also light-duty vehicles. And as I am a representative of a business organization, of course, it is not surprising that I'm not in favor of low emission or environmental zones. I think we have this air quality plan in Hamburg, as most of the other European cities do. And this plan is working. It's not working from today until tomorrow, but it's working within the next couple of years. Maybe you can also add the fact that since last fall, every new car in Europe has to be a car belonging to the category Euro 6. Diesel cars and also conventional fuel cars. So as time goes on, the situation is getting better. It is indeed the question if this is fast enough or not, but I am not in favor and not promoting low emission zones, of course.
I've also done measurements in Milan, which has a very stringent low emission zone. And it's very controversial because it basically cars, unless they're the most advanced cars are not allowed into the central part of the city. And the business people are complaining, but I've made measurements in those cities, and we have papers from those cities, that the black carbon levels and the NOx levels are reduced a huge amount in these central parts of the old cities in Europe. And it's a business problem, but in the large picture, it's a public health problem. And people come to those places because they're nicer now.
All right. Is there any pressing questions from the audience? Going once, going twice? Okay, last one.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's fine.
So the question is about if you are not in favor in a low emission zones. How about congestion charge now? Because as far as I remember, Stockholm and London go this way, yeah, and it really brings less traffic than less pollution. So that's the question.
Vice.
This would be another possibility, of course. This is in a socially way, because only the well-situated people are in the position to pay the congestion charges and go into the city center. In the future, we have a social democratic government in Hamburg, so a congestion charge is not a good option for the Hamburg government. I think introducing low emission zones would be even more, yeah, they would prefer introducing low emission zones, but not a congestion charge.
Okay, thank you. There's one more question from the audience.
I think, thank you for the studies and the information. I think both Simon and Dan has shown the data already, but the problem is that people are not scared enough. And in order to make the public think more in their own health terms or companies in economic terms, you need to put the two kinds of data together. And I wonder if there are efforts to do that.
Yeah, maybe Simon, you can respond to this communication advocacy, translating the data into these messages to the public and the policymakers here.
Well, certainly, I think this is the way to go. It's great that we have different people with different background coming to this conference and sharing data from all sorts of studies, and the next step then is how to combine them into something really powerful and easy to understand for policymakers to digest and then to come up with solutions. But I think it's not just about the policymakers, because I think it's important to put the message to the general public as well, and also for the business sector. So we have in Hong Kong we have NGOs, we have business association who are also very concerned about air quality in the city, and I think they are working, tirelessly to try to, come up with these important messages to, to the general public and to the members, so that we all understand how important and how we can work together to improve air quality and why we should do that, because it's good for public health, it's good for everyone. And by doing that, it's also good for the government, because government has to pay a lot for public health services. It's good for the business, because if the air quality is good, if the city is attractive, then there'll be more business. So I think how to put everything into a whole package so that everyone understands and agree on, and then we can move on with all these solutions. I think it takes time, but in Hong Kong, I can say it's already on the move. I think we are getting closer, but we have to work even harder.
Thank you very much. Dane, any?
And I've only been a Hong Kong resident for 4 years now, but I came from a strong air quality regulatory environment in California. And what I can see that the basic problem is it's easy to do air monitoring, it's easier to make regulations, but it's very difficult to link what you've done to any improvement in air quality or in terms of human health consequence. And I don't know how that can be done best, but in fact, I know the organization that that you're involved in, Clean Air Initiative, is one of them, but Simon's group is another group, is trying to focus in on the consequences of the air quality issues. It's in Hong Kong, every week there's an article on air quality, and sometimes it's even accurate. Usually it's only partially accurate, but we need to improve the accuracy of our communication. You can't keep crying wolf to the public every time. You need to give them something that's factually based and that policymakers can act on.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm being prompted that we need to wrap up. Maybe for that question, sir, you can approach the speakers later. Just a very quick wrap up of the interesting discussions. Again, we looked at the importance of having this scientifically sound data, which we establish these policies with. We see the complexities in terms of looking at the air quality issue, more complexity in terms of integrating the issues on air quality and the pedestrians, looking at the institutional aspects of it, and the really looking at the linkages among these different elements. But in terms of looking at the policies, we've also seen the need for an integrated approach in terms of looking at integrating the studies, the institutional arrangements, and the engagement of the different stakeholders to address this issue, and then also looking at the proper messaging and packaging of the whole thing. So with that, I would like to thank the speakers and for you guys for staying. It is coffee break. We've taken like 7 minutes off your coffee break, so thank you very much. This is very interesting discussion. Thank you.